The sun greeted me warmly that morning, a rare treat after weeks of dreary weather. My hands, wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, were still as I stood in the garden, admiring the newly blossomed roses. It was a perfect holiday morning, serene and promising, until the peace was shattered by the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway. Richard, my husband of 10 years, stepped out of the car, followed closely by his sister Anna. They were an odd pair, Richard with his stern-lined face and Anna, ever the carefree spirit, albeit with a cunning glint in her eyes. They were laden with bags, their arms straining under the weight. I set my cup down, a sense of unease creeping up my spine. "Richard, what's all this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. Richard's response was blunt, like a sledgehammer to my calm morning. "We're moving in with you from today," he declared, as Anna smirked beside him. I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What do you mean moving in? And why?" Anna's smirk widened. "If you don't like it, Helen, you can always divorce him and leave," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Before I could gather my wits to respond, they barged past me, their footsteps heavy against the wooden floor. My once tranquil living room was quickly cluttered with their belongings. I stood frozen, watching the invasion of my personal space, my sanctuary. Just then, Mia, Anna's 14-year-old daughter, entered the room. Her eyes, a mirror image of her mother's, were filled with apology. Unlike Anna, Mia had always been gentle, a flower struggling to bloom in the shadow of her mother's overpowering presence. I found my voice, albeit a whisper. "Is this really okay? I mean, with Mia and all?" Richard, who had been directing Anna on where to place her myriad of bags, stopped dead in his tracks. His face, usually an unreadable mask, turned pale. Without a word, he dashed out, his phone pressed against his ear. Anna, now left alone to face me, looked as if she might faint. The arrogance had vanished from her face, replaced by a dawning realization of something gone awry. "I can't wait for Richard to come back," I said, my voice stronger now. Anna flinched at my words. "Brace yourself, Anna. The real fight starts now." As I stood there, facing the chaos, a part of me wondered how my life had spiraled into this mess. I was Helen Davis, a 50-year-old accountant, living a life that was more a routine than an experience. My marriage to Richard, once a source of comfort, had become a suffocating trap. Richard and I met at a community event. He was a local businessman 10 years my senior, and I was a volunteer. We connected over shared interests, and before I knew it, we were married. It was a simple ceremony, Richard insisting that anything more was frivolous. From the start, Richard was a traditionalist. He believed in clear roles within a marriage, and unfortunately that meant I was relegated to the background, my opinions and desires secondary to his. "I'll handle the finances and decisions. You just make sure the house is in order," he would say, his tone final. I complied initially. I thought his dominance was a sign of his commitment and care. But as the years rolled by, the charming businessman I married revealed himself to be controlling and dismissive. Our home, once a haven of shared dreams and laughter, had turned into a silent battlefield. I would tiptoe around his moods and his commands, trying to keep the peace, but inside I was screaming for an escape, for a breath of fresh air. That morning, as I watched Anna spread her belongings across my living room, I felt a surge of anger. This was not just an invasion of space. It was a blatant disregard for my existence, my choices. And Richard, the man who had vowed to cherish and respect me, stood silently by, a spectator to his sister's audacity. Anna's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear. She knew she had crossed a line, but her arrogance was too ingrained to step back. She was like a parasite, feeding off Richard's affection and my tolerance. "I hope you're ready for the consequences, Anna," I said, my voice calm but firm. Her response was a scoff, but her eyes betrayed her. She knew she had awakened a dormant adversary, and as I stood there, amidst the chaos they had brought into my home, I realized that this was not just an invasion. It was a declaration of war. The sound of Richard's car pulling up again snapped me out of my thoughts. I braced myself for the confrontation, for the battle that was about to begin. The doors opened, and Richard stormed in, his face a mask of confusion and anger. "What's going on, Helen? Why is Anna panicking?" he demanded, his eyes darting between me and his sister. "This," I gestured to the mess around us, "is what your decision has led to. Your sister, your house, your rules. But not anymore, Richard. Not anymore. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. Richard looked at me, then at Anna, and a realization dawned on him. He had underestimated me, taken my silence for submission. But as the sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the chaos, I knew this was just the beginning of my fight for freedom, for my voice. The shadows of retribution were finally lifting, and I was ready to step into the light. Richard's confusion melted into a frown, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed the scene before him. "Helen, this is temporary. Anna needs us," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. I scoffed. "Temporary? Richard, your sister has bought half a house here. And you," I turned to Anna, "you waltz in here as if you owned the place." Anna rolled her eyes, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, come on, Helen. It's not like you use this space for anything important. Besides, Richard agrees with me, don't you, brother?" Richard nodded, his allegiance clear. "Anna's going through a tough time. We need to be there for her." I felt a surge of anger. "And what about me, Richard? When have you ever considered what I need?" Richard's expression hardened. "You have everything you need, Helen. A roof over your head, food on the table. What more do you want?" His words stung, and I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. "I want a husband who sees me as an equal, not just a caretaker for his home and his burdensome sister." Anna snorted. "Equal? Please. You should be grateful Richard even married you. At your age, options aren't exactly lining up." Her words were like a slap in the face, but I stood my ground. "Grateful? For a marriage that suffocates me? For a husband who values his sister's whims over his wife's feelings?" Richard's face reddened, his anger boiling over. "Enough, Helen. You're overreacting. Anna is family." "And what am I?" I shot back, my voice trembling with emotion. "Just a convenient accessory to your life?" The room fell silent, the tension thick and suffocating. Richard and Anna exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. I knew then that I was fighting a losing battle. Richard finally spoke, his voice cold. "Pack your things, Helen. If you can't accept my sister, you can't be part of this family." His words were a dagger to my heart, but I refused to let them see me break. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'll leave. But remember this, Richard. I am not your property. I am a person, and I will not be dismissed so easily." I turned on my heel and walked to our bedroom, my mind racing. As I began packing my things, tears blurred my vision. I had given up so much for this marriage, only to be cast aside for Anna's selfishness. But amidst the hurt and betrayal, a fire ignited within me. I would not let them break me. I would fight back, and I would reclaim my life. As I zipped up my suitcase, I looked around the room that had been my sanctuary. It was time to leave, to start anew. But as I stepped out of the bedroom, suitcase in tow, I knew one thing for certain. This was not the end. It was just the beginning of my journey to retribution. The door slammed behind me as I left the house, my heart pounding with a mix of fear, anger, and a newfound determination. The crisp morning air was a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere I'd just escaped. I took a moment to steady my breath, realizing that this was the first step towards reclaiming my life. As I walked, the memories of the last few years played in my mind like a tragic movie. Richard, once my rock, had slowly morphed into an unrecognizable tyrant. His sister Anna always lurking in the shadows, influencing his decisions, undermining me at every turn. I found myself outside Mia's school, the realization hitting me that I hadn't said goodbye. Mia, the one ray of light in the otherwise dark canvas of my marriage. I saw her then, walking out of the school gates, her face a picture of innocence and youth. "Mia," I called out, my voice catching in my throat. She turned, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Helen, what are you doing here?" I knelt down to her level, my eyes searching hers. "Mia, I've left your uncle's house. Things have become too difficult." Her face fell, a frown marring her young features. "Is it because of Mom? Did she do something again?" I sighed, hating that she had to be exposed to her mother's toxic behavior. "Yes, Mia. Your mom and your uncle, they've made some decisions that I can't live with." Mia's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. "I wish you could stay. You're the only one who listens to me, who cares about what I want." I hugged her, my heart breaking. "I care about you so much, Mia, and I promise I'll always be here for you, no matter what." We stood there for a moment, two souls united in our mutual pain. Finally I pulled away, wiping her tears. You need to be strong, Mia. Don't let them change who you are. You're a wonderful, kind-hearted girl, and I'm so proud of you. Mia nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. I will be, Helen, and I'll come to visit you, wherever you are. As I watched her walk back into the school, a plan began to form in my mind. Richard and Anna had underestimated me, seen me as nothing more than a compliant wife, but I would show them. I would fight back, and I would make them pay for every tear, every moment of pain they had caused me. I walked away from the school, my steps more confident than before. The game had changed, and I was no longer just a pawn. I was a queen, ready to take back my kingdom. I found refuge in a small, unassuming cafe, the kind where strangers become confidants. As I sipped my coffee, the warmth of the mug seeped into my hands, mirroring the growing resolve in my heart. It was there, amidst the quiet hum of the cafe, that I began to piece together my plan. A sudden ring from my phone jolted me. It was Mia. Helen, you need to come to Grandma's house. There's something you should know about Mom. The urgency in her voice was unmistakable. I paid for my coffee and hurried to the address she had given me. Arriving at the quaint house, I was greeted by Mia and her grandparents, Richard and Anna's parents. The air was heavy with tension as they ushered me into the living room. Mia's grandmother, a stern yet kind woman, wasted no time. Helen, we've been blind for too long. Anna is in trouble, and it's far worse than we imagined. I sat, bracing myself for what was to come. Mia's grandfather, a man of few words, spoke up. Anna's addicted to gambling. She's amassed a significant debt, and now she's targeting your home to settle it. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. Anna's arrogance, her sudden move into our house, it all made sense now. Mia's grandmother continued, her voice laced with regret. We've enabled her for too long, thinking we were helping, but we were wrong. We're cutting her off financially. I nodded, my mind racing with the implications. And Richard? Does he know about this? He knows, Mia's grandfather said, his voice heavy with disappointment, but he's too blinded by his need to protect Anna. He's part of the problem. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, each one fueling my resolve. I stood up, my decision clear. I need to confront them. They need to know I'm aware of their deceit. Mia grabbed my hand, her eyes pleading. Be careful, Helen. Mom can be unpredictable. I squeezed her hand, a smile tinged with determination. Don't worry, Mia. I'm not the same person they think they can push around. It's time they see the real me. Leaving Mia's grandparents' house, I felt a strange cocktail of emotions. Anger, certainly, at the betrayal and deceit. But also empowerment, a sense of clarity and purpose I hadn't felt in years. I drove back to the house, each mile bringing me closer to a confrontation I never imagined I'd have the courage to face. But there I was, ready to stand up to the very people who had made my life a living hell. I entered the house without knocking, finding Richard and Anna in the living room. The sight of them, so complacent in their scheming, ignited a fire within me. Richard, Anna, we need to talk, I announced, my voice steady and commanding. Richard looked up, surprise etched on his face. Helen? What are you doing here? I know about Anna's gambling debts. I know she's planning to use this house to pay them off, I said, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Anna's face contorted into a sneer. What are you going to do about it, Helen? Cry and run away? I met her gaze, unwavering. No, Anna. I'm going to make sure you both pay for what you've done, to me, to this family. Richard's expression faltered, a hint of guilt flashing across his face. Helen, Save it, Richard. I've heard enough of your excuses. You chose Anna over our marriage. Now, you'll have to live with the consequences. Anna laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You think you can scare us, Helen? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. Her words were meant to wound, but they only strengthened my resolve. I may have been nothing to you, but that ends today. I'm taking back control of my life, and I'll start by making sure everyone knows the kind of people you really are. Richard stood up, a mix of anger and desperation in his eyes. You wouldn't dare. You know how this will look, the scandal, the gossip. I cut him off, my voice cold. I don't care about the gossip, Richard. I care about justice, about righting the wrongs you and your sister have committed. Anna's face turned pale, her bravado faltering. You can't prove anything, Helen. It's your word against ours. I smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, but I can, Anna. I've been collecting evidence, bank statements, gambling debts, everything. I have more than enough to prove your deceit." Richard's face drained of color. "Helen, please, let's talk about this. We can sort it out." I shook my head. "It's too late for talking, Richard. You made your choice, and now you'll have to face the consequences." As I turned to leave, I left them with one final statement. "I'll be filing for divorce, Richard, and I'll make sure the truth about Anna's debts comes out. You've both played this game for far too long. Now, it's my turn." I walked out of the house, the sound of their panicked voices fading behind me. I had stepped into the battle, fully armed and ready. The game of deceit and betrayal they had been playing was over. It was time for retribution, and I was going to make sure they paid for every tear, every moment of suffering they had caused. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal consultations and covert planning. My lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Diane, was a beacon of support, guiding me through the labyrinth of divorce proceedings. The day of the confrontation arrived like a storm. I stood outside the courthouse, my heart racing with a mix of dread and determination. Richard and Anna were already there, their faces masks of feigned innocence. As we were called in, I took a deep breath, readying myself for the battle ahead. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the fiery emotions brewing inside me. Richard's lawyer was the first to speak, painting a picture of a harmonious marriage disrupted by my sudden and unreasonable demands. I listened, my fists clenched, as he spun lies as easily as a spider weaves its web. Then it was Diane's turn. She began methodically, laying out the facts with precision. "Your Honor, the reality is starkly different from what has been presented by the defense. We have evidence of financial misconduct and emotional abuse, all perpetrated by Mr. Richard Davis and his sister, Ms. Anna Davis." Anna's eyes widened, her composure slipping. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his gaze avoiding mine. Diane continued, her voice steady and clear. "We have bank statements showing large sums transferred to Miss Davis's account, coinciding with her gambling debts. We also have testimonies from witnesses who have observed the emotional abuse my client suffered in her marriage." Richard's lawyer tried to interject, but Diane was unyielding. "Furthermore, we have evidence of a plan to sell the marital home without my client's consent to cover Miss Davis's debts." The judge looked over the documents Diane presented, his expression growing increasingly stern. Anna squirmed in her seat, her earlier arrogance replaced by a growing sense of panic. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. I was called to the stand, my heart pounding in my chest. I recounted the years of neglect, the emotional turmoil, and the final straw that broke the camel's back. Their plan to usurp my home. As I spoke, I kept my eyes on Richard and Anna. Richard's face was a picture of defeat, his eyes hollow and resigned. Anna, on the other hand, was seething, her hands clenched into tight fists. The judge finally spoke, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "Based on the evidence presented, it's clear that there has been significant wrongdoing on the part of Mr. Davis and Ms. Davis. I am inclined to grant the divorce and rule in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Helen Davis." Anna erupted, her voice shrill with anger. "This is nonsense. She's lying, all of it. Helen's just a bitter old woman who can't stand to see anyone else happy." The outburst only served to cement the judge's decision. "Order in the court, Miss Davis. Your behavior is only proving the plaintiff's point. I will not tolerate any more outbursts." The gavel came down, and with it the final blow to Richard and Anna's facade. As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth had prevailed, and karma had served its course. The fallout from the courtroom was swift and unforgiving. News of Richard and Anna's deceit and the divorce spread through our social circles like wildfire. I watched, with a sense of detached vindication, as their reputations crumbled under the weight of their actions. Richard, once a respected businessman, found his clients and associates distancing themselves. Anna, too, faced her own downfall. The gambling dens she frequented now turned her away, her debts too high and her backers too few. But the true retribution came in the form of their parents' intervention. Mia's grandparents, having witnessed the extent of their children's misdeeds, took decisive action. They cut Anna off financially, a move that left her reeling and desperate. I met with Mia's grandparents a few days after the trial. They welcomed me with a warmth that was tinged with sadness. "We should have seen it, Helen," Mia's grandmother lamented. "We turned a blind eye for too long." Mia's grandfather nodded in agreement. "We're taking responsibility now. Anna will have to learn to fend for herself. And as for Richard, he needs to understand the consequences of his choices." Their resolve was a balm to my wounded heart. They, too, had been victims of Richard and Anna's manipulation, and now they stood with me in seeking justice. The next chapter of retribution unfolded at the final divorce settlement meeting. Richard sat across from me, a shadow of the man he once was. His eyes were hollow, his defiance replaced by a quiet resignation. As the terms were laid out, I could see the realization dawn on him. He was losing everything: his home, a significant portion of his assets, and any semblance of dignity he had clung to. Anna, not present at the meeting, was dealt her blow through legal channels. She was required to undertake a debt repayment plan, a far cry from the lavish lifestyle she was accustomed to. As I signed the final papers, a sense of closure washed over me. I had come out of this battle scarred but victorious. Richard and Anna had been brought to justice, not just by the law, but by the karma of their own making. Leaving the meeting, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I was free from the chains of a loveless marriage, free from the suffocating grip of Richard and Anna's deceit. I had lost much in this fight, but I had gained something far more valuable: my freedom and a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I walked out into the sunlight, I felt a smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a woman who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to walking it. The days following the divorce were a mix of relief and rediscovery. I had stepped out of the shadow of my marriage, and now the world seemed different, more vibrant, and filled with possibilities. One afternoon, I found myself in a quaint bookstore, a place I had often passed but never entered during my marriage. As I browsed through the shelves, I felt a sense of peace. It was in these small moments I realized that life began to regain its color. The bell above the door chimed, and in walked Mia, her face brightening as she saw me. "Helen!" she exclaimed, rushing over. "I heard about the divorce being finalized. Are you okay?" I smiled, embracing her warmly. "I'm more than okay, Mia. I feel like I've been given a new lease on life." Her eyes sparkled with unshed tears. "I'm so happy for you, and I'm sorry for everything my mom and uncle put you through." "It's not your fault, Mia. You've been one of the few lights in my life these past few years," I reassured her. We sat down in a cozy corner of the bookstore, sipping tea from the little cafe inside. Mia shared her plans for college, her eyes alight with dreams and ambitions. I listened, my heart swelling with pride for the remarkable young woman she had become. Then Mia hesitated, her expression turning serious. "Helen, there's something else. My grandparents, they want to help you. They feel guilty about everything." I shook my head gently. "Mia, they've done enough. Just having their support during the trial meant the world to me." "But they insist. They want to give you a part of the money from the sale of the house. It's only fair," they said. The offer took me aback. Richard and Anna had been forced to sell the house to settle their debts, and now Mia's grandparents wanted to ensure I received my rightful share. After some thought, I accepted. Not for the money, but to honor the gesture of goodwill and closure from two people who had become like family to me. With this unexpected financial security, I began to rebuild my life. I found a small but charming apartment, decorated it to my taste, and for the first time, made a space that was truly mine. I also rekindled old friendships, ones that had dwindled under the weight of my unhappy marriage. My friends welcomed me back with open arms, their support a testament to the enduring nature of true friendship. As for Richard and Anna, they faded into the background of my life. Richard had moved to a different city, a shadow of his former self, and Anna, burdened by her debts and the loss of her family's support, had become a mere footnote in my story. One sunny afternoon, as I walked through the park, I realized something profound. In seeking revenge and justice, I had found something far more important: my own strength and resilience. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with pain and confrontation, but it had led me to a place of self-discovery and empowerment. I saw couples walking hand in hand, children laughing as they played, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel a pang of sadness or loss. I was content, at peace with my past and optimistic about my future. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, I reflected on the journey I had undertaken. The road to retribution had been paved with challenges, but it had also brought unexpected blessings, friendships rekindled, a new sense of purpose, and a deeper understanding of my own resilience. I left the park with a light heart, ready to embrace whatever adventures lay ahead. The chapter of Richard and Anna was closed, but my story was far from over. It was a new beginning, a new chapter filled with hope, possibilities, and a newfound appreciation for the simple joys of life.